From Software recently put out a playtest for their yet to release Duskbloods, and it finally gave us an idea of what this title is all about. The game really is shaping up to be a bit of a hit or miss anomaly within this industry, a joint venture between From and Nintendo, two developers that typically put out more single player focused titles over following financially successful trends. I can easily see it turning off some purists on these simple facts alone. But even given the polarizing direction that Duskbloods has taken, I found myself coming to terms and very much enjoying what this small taste gave us after understanding the type of game it actually is. Of course, it's important to note here that we only experienced a small taste with this playtest and many things are going to change with the final build, but I still think it's somewhat important to review the good and bad of what we've seen so far with this title. And I will admit, I am starting to feel a bit fatigued with these more online focused releases, especially since we just had Night Rain, which was amazing and a creative twist on the Elden Ring formula. But at this point, I feel ready for what From Software are known for, that being their single player story rich focus experiences. It doesn't look like the Duskbloods will scratch that itch, however I found that despite it being multiplayer focused, the combat here has the potential to be the best that we've seen from this developer, who truly are literal trendsetters when it comes to this style of gameplay. I mean, things have really been cranked up to 11 here. You have multiple jumps in the Duskbloods and can go flying around in the air, crashing down on other enemies. In a player versus player environment, characters will be jumping around, shooting one another, popping off different skills, and it all just creates this chaotic mess which can be really fun. Once again, I do feel like purist fans might have a knee-jerk reaction to this coming from games like Demon's Souls because it is such a big departure from more traditional combat systems. But for this style of game that's more focused on collecting points and killing as many things as possible, I do think it suits it. Of course, in many ways, despite the Duskbloods feeling like a departure from previous titles from this developer, it can also feel like an evolution. Specifically in its gunplay, it feels like a natural progression from what was in Bloodborne. And in all honesty, despite absolutely loving Bloodborne, I was never really a fan of the gunplay in that game. It never felt satisfying for me personally. Using it for parry windows felt so random and it could never actually deal proper damage. But in the Duskbloods, I found myself using it all the time. With its more robust movement system, having something like a gun is very handy since you can just shoot people that are flying around in the air. And it's also a great way to finish off players that want to run off and heal. Another neat feature for the gunplay in Duskbloods is that every character has their own unique moveset. This was also a feature in Night Rain, however in that game I felt like characters played a bit too different, where they felt like more of a time investment to where most players would just have a main and not really experiment beyond that. I was also guilty of doing this. But in the Duskbloods playtest, I gave every member of its roster a try and actually felt like I could easily pick them up and enjoy their movesets and weapons. Some folks might prefer how it was in Night Rain, to where it felt like you as a player had a specific role to fulfill, but I personally like it more here since you can easily change things up with its easy to pick up and play roster. Because of this, so far it feels like the Duskbloods might not have that issue that other online games suffer from, where metas will dominate certain pick rates online. But we'll just have to wait and see on that one. Anyway, back to its gunplay. So you'll have characters like Zorg that uses a shotgun, but then you'll also have Layla as this amazing sniper rifle that even has its own reticle. It kind of looks ridiculous seeing in a game like this, but I'm all for it. There's also Bloodhound Jan that just uses literal fire coming from his palms. It's a very creative mechanic that has a surprising amount of application. But that's not all. As you'd expect from a game like this, each character levels up and has their own unique skills associated with them. Typically their first skill is more defensive orientated, giving them an ability to move away from combat really quickly. For instance, Zork has his own jetpack ability where he can literally zoom across the map, and there's also Layla with her Wraith ability which allows her to be invincible. It's a clever design principle to implement each character with their own defensive maneuver, since at the start of a round you're very much vulnerable and can easily get attacked from other players. Now, I'm gonna be completely honest with ya, I can't stand explaining the rules of this game, it's very confusing. From Software took a bit of a different approach when it came to explaining how this game is played with its own online website, as well as the tutorial that you play before starting a round. And whilst I can appreciate its slower tutorials found in its different menus, I can't really say it made the game very easy to understand. It more or less overcomplicates things, so allow me to explain how you play the Duskbloods using my own words and understanding of it. So each match is comprised of 4 rounds, and you want to collect what's known as virtue, which are essentially just points, and you get them by killing things. Basically, yeah, you can find some scattered across the map, but for the most part you want to kill bosses and other players. Outside of its first round, each subsequent round will eliminate players with the least amount of points. This will keep on going until there's just 3 left standing, which will then be teleported into a big arena, and it's just the last man standing which will get the win. Now, I don't want to toot my own horn here, but this explanation makes way more sense compared to From Software's own. It really felt like they wanted me to swallow a thesaurus with how many technical terms they use to describe certain things. This is just a small nitpick of course, but I can see you potentially throwing off newcomers that might want to try this game for themselves. Seriously, just don't play the tutorials, they made me so angry trying to understand everything. You'll get much further blindly going through matches until it all just makes sense. I do think in some ways however, this is a genuine complaint since From Software themselves can't even explain the Duskbloods in a way that can be described in just one sentence. But moving on to the matches, at the start of a round you'll very much want to prioritize finding a kin, which acts as a summon that you can use in combat. Each of these kins have their own unique playstyles such as healing, buffing and just attacking. They'll even unlock new moves as they level up, and there's a surprising amount of player expression when it comes to picking which one you want to use. I can easily see in the final build people prioritizing different kins to complement their playstyles. They're always a net positive to have since they'll help you during combat, so you'll always want to prioritize getting one. In Duskblood's main game mode, you also have the ability to form alliances with other players. Now this mechanic is kinda strange, but similar to the kins it's also just a net positive, so typically what I do is just find whichever player I see first and try and form an alliance with them. Afterwards, whichever points or virtue you find will be shared between the two of you, so it increases your chance of survival. In some ways I can see the enjoyment behind this mechanic since it encourages cooperative behaviour, which is something I prefer in online games. But it also suffers from kind of a fatal flaw in my opinion, and that's the simple fact that if you're one player and come across a person that's already formed an alliance, then your chance of survival is just way lower. In the early game it's not much of an issue, but towards the end of the act when there's less and less players, you'll start to find that it's pretty difficult to start to catch up compared to someone who's sharing points with another person. From the limited information that we can gather online and through the playtest, there is some kind of combat mechanic implemented in this game, I'm just not sure what really activates it. But hopefully in the final build of this game, the alliance mechanic is tightly designed to where they don't get such a huge advantage over single player opponents. But that being said, if the sound of this mechanic isn't your cup of tea, then you can easily disable it through its match options. From its limited marketing online, it looks like From Software is heavily banking on this alliance concept since it's tied very much to the identity of the Duskbloods. But playing with the option disabled didn't really change anything in my opinion. I know the Duskbloods isn't even out yet, so please take my opinion here with a grain of salt, but I can't help but feel like this alliance idea is just a gimmick. But I am open to changing my mind on it in the future, it's just that this playtest didn't really sell me on the concept. But as a whole, I do really like the flow of a match in the Duskbloods. Unlike Night Rain, it doesn't feel like a huge time investment since matches typically last for only 20 minutes. And it gets better as the match progresses, especially since more and more players are getting knocked out, so you're playing against the very best that's left. And getting to that final round is such a sight to behold, it's sort of chaos as you'd expect, but it's so much fun to actually play. Unfortunately, as I was playing through these sessions of the Duskbloods, I never managed to actually win at all. But there was one instance during the finals where I was very much about to win, I was locked in and everything, but the session timed out, which really sucked. Boy. And you know what, despite my frustrations over being interrupted whilst locked in, all I can really say is that it made me want to play the game even more. And that's really where I stand with the Duskbloods so far, I just want to play the game more. I understand that this video is kind of redundant since the game isn't even out yet, but no one's really talking about this title, especially Nintendo and From Software, they need to advertise it more. We've got like 4 months left of this year and it's still slated to release in 2026 and Nintendo's barely been marketing it. I still have a couple of concerns over this release, such as its longevity and how long people will even be playing it for. But I mean, all of that is kinda pointless to say since we don't even know how much content is in this title. I do think it would benefit from having a structure similar to Splatoon's where it will get free updates over time just to bring people back. since unfortunately in today's day and age you need constant updates to keep a game interesting according to most players, and with its more honest route of not being heavily monetized, I can see it kinda struggling on that front. But I mean, Nintendo and From Software are some of the best developers in this industry, so if anyone can pull a title of this scale off, I'm sure they can. But for the time being, I suppose we'll just have to sit tight and hope for that eventual direct that will finally answer some of our questions. But I mean, whilst we sit around waiting and speculating, we could talk about the Duskbloods in the comments. What did you think about this game? Feel free to let me know. As always, any feedback on this video is appreciated. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.